So with that in mind, like I know the dude's first guy in school history to go for 2,500 yards passing, 30 TDs, and 500 yards rushing, but like, is he a top 20 quarterback in FBS? I don't think so. Do you think so?
Top 20 is interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he's probably top 20. If you were to just watch him throw the ball, could I find 19 or 20 guys who have a bigger arm or appear to be a little bit more of a pure passer? You probably could, but frankly, that's not how we judge quarterbacks, right? It's everything that goes into it. At OU, all of those quarterbacks get the benefit of Lincoln Riley calling the plays, and look, that gets factored into their effectiveness. Ian Book showed me last year, even though he was not as good as the numbers would tell you. I think he ended up throwing, 34 touchdown passes, and I think he had at least 6 rushing touchdowns, so 40 total touchdowns. That's elite. He was more uneven than those numbers would show you, especially at the start of the year. But he did figure some things out down the stretch and was really solid and understood what the team needed from him better as the season went on. I think if you factor in his ability to get away from the rush, he is really, really good at that. His ability to beat you with his arm and his legs. His accuracy, even though his completion percentage took a step back last year, he was completing 70% of his passes 2 years ago. In most throws, he's really, really accurate, and he did get a little bit better throwing the deep ball last year. I think if you throw everything in and then the guys that he has around him, that offensive line, I definitely think he will be one of college football's 20 best quarterbacks this year in terms of production and effectiveness. And I think, to me, it wouldn't surprise me a bit if he was top 10 and maybe even could inch a little bit higher than that. I think pretty highly of Ian Book. And I don't think that's because I'm a Notre Dame guy. He has his naysayers in the Notre Dame world, without a doubt, because everybody wants somebody who throws it around like Pat Mahomes, somebody who throws it around like Spencer Rattler. He's not that guy. He was a 3-star kid. The arm talent doesn't just jump off the screen. But I've got a lot of respect for his grittiness. And the fact, look, they went 12-1 2 years ago. They went 11-2 last year. It wasn't great every single week. It was a little bit uneven at times, but he's my quarterback. I said on Twitter in response to some Notre Dame fans earlier this offseason, there are 2 types of Notre Dame fans in my mind. Those who consider everything that the Notre Dame football program has been and hasn't been over the last 25 years and say, thank you that Ian Book is our quarterback in his 5th season in South Bend.
So,
and then there are the kind of people that I wish would just find a different team to root for. Because, if you're comparing him to Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, Jalen Hurts, no, he's not in that conversation. So, Oklahoma fans wouldn't look at Ian Book and say, oh, thank God we've got this guy. But if you're a Notre Dame fan and you've seen some of the quarterback play we've had over the last 2 decades, I just say thank you and move on with your day. This guy's been really, really good for Notre Dame.
And I guess that's what I compare him to is he's supposed to be great. Like, I do put him in the same category as Jalen Hurts, but you also know how I feel about Jalen Hurts. I think Ian Book in Lincoln Riley's system is a different quarterback. That said, I think he's also better when he's on the move. Like when I went to Sanford for Georgia and Notre Dame, they were best when he was outside the pocket. Now, that led me to what I really wanted to know from you, because I'm looking at that offensive line. And it looks like the kind that can win a Joe Moore Award. They're going to return 5 starters. But are they going to have anybody to run the ball? Are they going to have anybody that's going to be able to, take advantage of that? Or is it really just going to be Ian Book trying to cook without Chris Fink and without Chase Claypool and throwing Jordan Johnson in there to the Wolves as a true freshman?
It is without a doubt the biggest hole in recruiting in recent years. Autry Denson, former great running back who was running back coach until last year, just was not fired up about recruiting, and at that position, especially at Notre Dame, where you're always having to go out of region to get elite guys, man, you got to be a dog on the recruiting trail. And he simply didn't have a passion for it. It's a problem without a doubt. They are far from elite. They've got a high 4-star, really speedy guy coming in Chris Tyree, but you can't imagine that a guy, especially now that, the voluntary workout season has taken a hit with COVID, you can't imagine that guy is going to be ready to tote the rock enough to be, the featured back. Jafar Armstrong is a guy who switched positions. He was a receiver at one point, and in 2018 had a pretty nice year at running back, but couldn't stay healthy. And then last year got hurt on the very first series of the year against Louisville, a groin injury, and never really did get right. He's the guy with the best combination of experience and the tools, but he just hasn't been able to stay healthy. And they are not elite at that position, and really they're not even close. If they were, you really could begin to talk yourself into, because as you mentioned, 5 returning starters on the offensive line, and really it's 6 because of how much Josh Lugg has played as well.
Right.
I think they may be a little bit overrated, because I've read some people think they'll have the best offensive line in the country, or the second or third best. To be honest, I don't think they're quite there. This is not Quentin Nelson, Mike McGlinchey, Zach Martin, Ronnie Stanley. This is not some of those first-round top 10 picks that they've had in recent years, but it's a nice collection of guys who have played a lot of ball together. I think they're going to be very effective. And, yeah, if you had a great running back behind Ian Book, you really could talk yourself into Notre Dame certainly being undefeated going in to take on Clemson, and you would feel a whole lot better about facing Clemson in that situation. But there is no doubt this is a good roster all the way around. It's a really good roster. I think a top 10 team between 8 and 12 is a great place to rank Notre Dame. But they are not elite. They're not even close at the running back position, and it probably is a problem. That said, if Jafar Armstrong can stay healthy and the light can go on for him, and we've seen that because Brian Kelly's player development has been really good for the last decade, and every year there are 2 or 3 guys who haven't done much, and then as a senior, it all clicks. If he becomes that guy, I think it does allow them to go to another level. Or if Chris Tyree is just that dude from day one as a freshman, that allows them to go to a different level. But as it stands, you wouldn't go to the bank on any of that. And so if you were to line up Notre Dame and all the other teams that consider themselves to be college football playoff contenders this year, I bet you Notre Dame is dead last in terms of running back talent.
I like Chris Tyree. I liked him when he committed last April, I want to say, like April 2019. But, like, that kid is the fastest kid that I've seen come out of that area since Travion Henderson this year, who's committed to Ohio State. But, like, he can fly. So if you get him the ball in space, I trust him. If you're asking him to run between the tackles, maybe not so much. So if he's DeMarco Murray light. He's not that big. He's not going to be that big, but he's fast, and he's got great hands. So it'd be interesting to see what Tommy Rees is able to do once you get him on campus. But on the other side of the ball, I'm used to having to talk about a Notre Dame defensive back when we get to the Jim Thorpe Award roundtable, talking about semifinalists, and then later about finalists. And, a couple years ago, I really loved Julian Love, right? He got my first place vote over DeAndre Baker, who won the award in 2018. And then last year, Alohi Gilman. And this year, one of the reasons I wanted to go to Notre Dame Georgia at Sanford was to see Kyle Hamilton, who's from the Atlanta area. Do you think that he's ready in his sophomore season to assume that role of being the dominant Notre Dame defensive back?
I got to tell you, I think in what I've told you here so far, I think I've earned my stripes as a pretty rational and reasonable Notre Dame fan. I'm not too high on Ian Book. I was brutally honest about the running back position. I just said our offensive line maybe is a little overrated. I'm telling you right now, every Notre Dame fan I know, and this is mostly in the social media world, and then my brother, we are irrationally confident about Kyle Hamilton. We simply have not seen a guy like this in South Bend, RJ. And you mentioned Julian Love, who was, oh my gosh, he was so productive and he was so tough. I loved him, but he ended up being a middle round pick, and didn't play very much for the New York Giants in his rookie year last year. Kyle Hamilton is a cut above, maybe 2 above even a guy like Julian Love, who was ultra productive. Now, they've got to protect him. Some of those, there are some pieces back there in the secondary that are question marks. And if there's a weak link back there, I think Kyle Hamilton, his ability to make plays can really be hurt if somebody's constantly just throwing away from Kyle Hamilton. That's possible. But, this guy as an athlete is so good. I am begging Brian Kelly to put him in on offense. I want to see the Charles Woodson thing. He is, in my mind, that good. We have not had a center fielder at the safety position like Kyle Hamilton Not since Lou Holtz, man. Not since the early 90s. There's no way that Notre Dame is at this kind of talent back there. So I could not be more fired up to see what he does. Now, they're going to have to be good. They're going to have to protect him some. Sean Crawford and Tariq Bracy Crawford's got to stay healthy, and Bracy's got to take a step forward and be a guy they can count on. And then at that other safety position, whether it's Isaiah Pryor, who transferred from Ohio State, or Houston Griffith, who was a high 4-star when he was recruited a few years back, they've got to become really serviceable, better than serviceable, good safeties. But if that happens, if they've got all of that in place and the D-line stays healthy, if this is a good defense, Kyle Hamilton can take them to another level because he, in my mind, I expect him to be the best player on the Notre Dame football team this year as a true sophomore. Like, his talent is just different than anybody else they have. This Notre Dame roster, with the exception of running back, doesn't have holes. There are good players all over the field. They go 2 and 3 deep. They develop their guys. Brian Kelly does that. But they've only got one Kyle Hamilton. He is the most special talent on this team, without a doubt.
So
I know that Clemson and Alabama, they have like 4 and 5 or 6 guys. Like, I get that. But for Notre Dame, like, we're relishing this because we simply don't. This is we protect Kyle Hamilton at all costs, my friend. Like, this dude is special.